Hi, and welcome to Talk Straight Bible. I am your host, Rafina Antonetti. God bless you this morning. My title today is There, but for the grace of God go I. This quote had been attributed to or by a 16th century English reformer named John Bradford. Now, some say that the saying has no has an unknown origin, but many attribute it to him because he was heard saying this when he saw a young man being escorted to his execution. So let me give you a little history this morning about this reformer, John Bradford. He was born in 1510. He was educated at a grammar school. He was talented with numbers and money and later served under Sir John Harrington of Exton as a servant. Through his good influence and abilities in auditing and writing, he gained favor and trust with his employer and occupied the office of paymaster of the English army during the wars of Henry VIII. Later, he became a law student at the Inner Temple in London, and through the contacts and preachings of a fellow student, he became acquainted and converted to the Protestant faith. This caused him to abandon his legal studies in in 1548 he took up theology at Catherine Hall, which is now St. Catherine's College. And in 1549, he was awarded his MA, and in that same year was appointed to a fellowship in Pembroke College in Cambridge. Following the death of Edward the Sixth in 1553, Mary the First ascended to the throne, bringing the threat of reprisals against opponents of Catholicism. In the first month of the new monarch reign, Bradford was arrested and imprisoned on the seemingly trivial charge of trying to stir up a mob and committed to the Tower of London. And although seemingly trivial at the time, stirring up a mob was a serious and dangerous act, leading to riot and possible death, and certainly major disturbance to society. On January 31st, 1555, Bradford was tried and condemned to death. Bradford was taken to Newgate Prison to be burned at the stake on July the 1st. So when men like Edward Brackensteath and Aubrey Townsend years later wrote about him, this was a phrase that I guess they felt that it was worth mentioning. There's familiar stories going on when he said, on seeing evildoers taken to the place of execution, he exclaimed, but for the grace of God, there goes John Bradford. And the matriarch, the martyr Bradford, when he saw a poor criminal led to execution, exclaimed, there, but for the grace of God goes John Bradford. He knew that the same evil principles were in his own heart, which had brought the criminal to that shameful end. So there's a whole mouthful here, but let me tell you how I got to this place. Moving forward, I saw a poster in church the other day that had the saying on it, but it didn't have a scripture reference. And I was wondering, how come? Why? I have heard this phrase so many times in my life. So then I found the scripture, which was probably where John Bradford and so many others like him got this from. In 1 Corinthians 15:10, when Paul says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace which bestowed upon me was not found vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me." So I'm going to read this again in the Amplified Version, and I'm going to go one verse up. 1 Corinthians 15:9 through 11 says, "For I am the least worthy of the apostles, and not yet to be called an apostle, because I at one time fiercely opposed and violently persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. His grace toward me was not without effect. In fact, I worked harder than all the apostles, though it was not I, but the grace of God with me. So whether it was I or they, this is what we preach, and this is what you believed and trusted in and relied on with confidence." Wow. He is so amazing, because it is not him, but the grace of God. The grace of God. So whether he says it best, whether it was I or they, this is what we preach. This is what you believed in. This is what you trusted in. This is what you relied in confidence. The resurrection of the dead. Now, he continues to say this to them, to the saints at Corinth. "Now, if Christ is preached as raised from the dead, how is it that some among you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, useless, amounting to nothing, and your faith is also vain, imaginary, unfounded, devoid of value and benefit, not based on truth." Paul, like so many before him, so many after him, even as myself, realized that God's amazing grace is why we are here. No other reason. God's death and Christ's death and resurrection, the blood that he shed, the persecution that he endured, is why we can say, "But by the grace of God go I, and that I am here." I was no good to anyone, no good to myself. I was a liar, a cheater, a thief, a drug addict, a disgrace. I was a deadbeat mom. I sold my baby's clothes for crack. But yet God's grace toward me was not in vain. God's love toward me was not in vain. Jesus didn't die for nothing. He died for me and for you because he saw something in us way beyond what we saw. He had a plan much greater than we had. Yet it is not I, but the grace of God with me. Paul says that unmerited favor and blessing that compels me to preach and teach his word. Had it not been for the grace of God, where would we be? I know for myself, I would be in my grave, because there's no way that I would have survived the lifestyle that I was living all those years. But that's why I understand all too well God's grace in my life. So many times we can take that for granted, thinking that God had to do this for us or has to do this for us. No, my friends, it's only by the grace. Only by the grace. When I see homeless people, drug addicts, alcoholics, prostitutes on the street, young people destroying their lives, I understand that phrase even more so. I understand that scripture there, "But the grace of God go I." There, but the grace of God I am. That's why I was, and I still could have not seen God's grace if my eyes were still blinded, but he opened up my eyes just as he opened up Paul's eyes. Remember? When he opened up his eyes, the scales came off his eyes and he was able to see. And Paul says it best when he says to the saints of Corinth who started to doubt, this is what we preach. This is what you believe, trusted in, relied on with confidence. Don't allow yourselves to be swayed by what you see or what you hear. Keep believing, keep trusting, keep having confidence in him. He is the author and finisher of your faith. He started your journey and he will be faithful to complete it. Philippians 1:6 says, and I am convinced and sure of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you, in me, will continue until the day of Jesus Christ, right up to the time of his return, developing that good work and perfecting and bringing it to full completion in us. May you have a wonderful day. Until we meet again, Shalom.